You might think procrastination is a time management problem. You might call yourself lazy, undisciplined, or unmotivated. But what if the reason you can't seem to finish things or even start them has nothing to do with productivity at all? What if it's not about your calendar, but about your history? Because for many people, procrastination isn't the problem. It's a symptom, a quiet, unseen effect of childhood shame. Not shame about what you did, but shame about who you were told to be. Today, I want to explore what Carl Jung can teach us about this. Why the fear of being seen runs so deep, and how healing this fear can be the key to not just getting things done, but feeling like you're finally allowed to live. Shame doesn't come from doing something wrong. The kind of shame that shapes your adult life comes from being made to feel that your very being was wrong. And it starts early, so early you may not even realize how deeply it's wired into your sense of self. You were probably just being yourself. Maybe you were full of questions, full of energy, and full of emotion. Maybe you cried easily or laughed loudly, or you had big dreams and a wild imagination. And then someone reacted. They told you to calm down, to grow up, and to stop being dramatic. Or maybe they didn't say anything at all. They just looked at you with disappointment or withdrew affection when you needed it most. All you knew was that your presence seemed to create tension. That being seen, being heard, and being you led to discomfort. And discomfort for a child feels dangerous. Carl Jung believed that what we repress as children doesn't disappear. It goes underground. It becomes part of the shadow, the hidden parts of us that continue to influence our behavior from behind the scenes. He wrote, "The acceptance of oneself is the essence of the whole moral problem. But how can you accept yourself when you were taught early on that your very nature was a problem? So you adapted. You tried to become more acceptable. You smiled when you didn't feel happy. You stayed quiet when something inside you wanted to speak. You made yourself smaller, more careful, and more palatable. You started editing yourself. And over time, this editing becomes so automatic, you don't even notice you're doing it. But your nervous system does, and it keeps the score. We often think of procrastination as a flaw in our willpower, something that needs fixing with more discipline or better habits. But when you look beneath the surface, procrastination isn't a failure of effort. It's a nervous system response. A quiet, unconscious attempt to protect you from something that once felt overwhelming or unsafe. The task you're avoiding isn't just a task. It carries emotional weight. You might be avoiding writing something not because it's hard, but because expressing your real thoughts still feels vulnerable. You might delay finishing a project not because you're careless, but because completing it means someone might finally see it and judge it. Carl Jung said, "What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size." Procrastination is often that quiet resistance, not against effort, but against exposure, against the emotional risks tied to being seen, evaluated, or even celebrated. Because celebration can feel just as dangerous as criticism when you were raised to feel unworthy of attention. For many people, the fear of failure is real. But just as real, sometimes even more so, is the fear of success. Because success brings visibility. Visibility brings attention, and attention can feel threatening. So the mind learns a protective pattern: delay. If I don't do it, I don't have to face what comes next. If I don't try, I can't fail. If I never finish it, it never gets judged. It's a form of emotional safety, not logical, but deeply protective. This is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of history. Your nervous system remembers the sting of past rejection, the humiliation of being called out, and the silence after you spoke your truth and no one responded. So now, when it's time to act, your body hesitates. As we grow up in environments where we feel judged or misunderstood, we learn something vital to our emotional survival: how to wear a mask. Not the kind you can see in a mirror, but the kind you feel when you're about to say something honest and instead say something polite. That mask is what Carl Jung called the persona, the version of you that was shaped to be liked, to be accepted, and to avoid conflict. It's not fake, but it's not the whole truth either. The problem isn't that we have a persona, we all do, but trouble begins when the persona becomes the only version of us we allow to be seen. When the mask becomes so permanent, we start forgetting what we look like underneath it. Here's where procrastination comes in, not as a time problem, but as an identity conflict. When the task in front of you demands authenticity, emotional presence, or real vulnerability, it asks you to act from the part of you that lives behind the mask. The hidden self, the self that was once rejected or told to hide. So you face a dilemma. The mask says, let's do what's expected. But the deeper self says, I can't show up like that. And instead of resolving the tension, your mind freezes. You stall. Not because you don't want to move forward, but because you're being pulled in two directions, one toward approval and one toward authenticity. Sometimes you might find yourself working hard, meeting deadlines, and checking boxes, only to feel completely disconnected from what you're doing. That's the persona doing its job. You're functioning, but you're not thriving. And when that disconnection goes on for too long, your energy starts to drain. You lose motivation, and tasks that once seemed doable now feel unbearable. That's because your hidden self, the part that holds your real values, desires, and voice, has been left out. And when that part of you is silenced for too long, it stops cooperating. You procrastinate, not because you're lazy, but because some part of you is rebelling against the false life you've been forced to perform. The moment you realize that your procrastination isn't laziness but a protective response, something begins to shift. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. When you name what's really happening, when you say to yourself, I'm not lazy, I'm afraid, you begin interrupting the shame cycle. You're not fixing everything at once. You're simply seeing it, feeling it, and meeting it with curiosity instead of criticism. This awareness may come with grief. You might look back and realize how many years you spent believing you were broken when, in reality, you were protecting a wounded part of yourself. Let that grief be a sign of healing beginning. Awareness doesn't mean you suddenly stop procrastinating, but now, when you do, you understand why. You can step back and say, this task is triggering something in me. What part of me feels unsafe right now? Instead of criticizing yourself, you begin to hold space for that part. This is how you slowly break the link between shame and avoidance. It's not about forcing yourself to act. It's about gently inviting yourself to see. When you stop judging your procrastination and start listening to it, it becomes less powerful, less paralyzing. At some point in your early life, being seen felt like danger. Maybe you spoke too loudly, asked too many questions, or showed too much excitement, and someone reacted harshly. Maybe they shamed you, laughed at you, and told you to sit down, be quiet, and stop showing off. In that moment, a message was planted deep. If I'm visible, I'll be hurt. That's the child you're now learning to reparent. Reparenting means meeting that younger part of you with the safety and warmth it never had. When procrastination shows up, it's often this hidden child pulling the brakes not because they're stubborn, but because they still believe exposure equals pain. Reparenting means showing up to that voice with care, not correction. It's sitting beside the fear and saying, I know why you're scared, but you're safe now. You don't have to disappear to be loved. This work happens daily, especially when you're about to step into something new. You'll feel resistance. You'll feel the old terror of being seen. But now, instead of powering through or shutting down, you can pause and speak to yourself differently. Yes, this is scary, but I'm here. We don't have to hide anymore. You don't need to be fearless. You don't need to be fully healed. You just need to be willing. Procrastination loses its grip when you stop waiting to feel ready and start moving in spite of the fear. Jung said, only the paradox comes anywhere near to comprehending the fullness of life. You can be afraid and still act. You can feel uncertain and still create. You can be imperfect and still worthy of being seen. What you think is laziness is often a dream buried under shame. A voice that wants to speak but is afraid no one will listen. Give that voice a chance. Let it be heard. Let it be messy. Let it be real. You're not behind. You're healing. And every time you take a step, any step, you're reminding yourself that the fear of being seen is no longer in control. You are. The goal isn't to crush procrastination. It's to understand it, to listen to it, and to outgrow the version of you that had to hide to feel safe. Because when you feel safe, you don't need to delay. When you feel accepted, you don't need to hide. And when being seen is no longer dangerous, the work becomes lighter, and you begin to act from a place of quiet confidence that says, I can show up, I can be real, and I can survive whatever comes next. I hope this resonated with you. If it did, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share your thoughts or experiences. Thanks for watching.